Tonight, wicked and evil. A teenage school shooter sentenced to 3 years detention. ASIO bombshell, how a former Australian politician became a foreign agent. A 21st birthday celebration decades in the making. And a test century to WA's Cameron Green steadies Australia on day one against New Zealand. Good evening, Pamela Medlen with ABC News. The Perth teenager who sparked fears of an American-style school shooting has been sentenced to 3 years juvenile detention, with a judge describing his actions as wicked and evil. The 15-year-old had initially intended to kill people, but changed his mind and ended up firing 3 shots at buildings, sending the school in Perth's north into lockdown.
It's a crime that sent shockwaves through the community. In May last year, a 15-year-old boy arrested after firing gunshots at the Atlantis Beach Baptist College in Two Rocks.
There's a classroom at the end. They're all hiding. It's all done. Yeah.
This is extraordinary stuff. Sort of thing you see occurring in the deep south of America that you don't expect to occur in Western Australia.
The guns belonged to the boy's father. He'd gained access to them before driving to the college and firing 3 shots. 2 bullets went into buildings while a third landed in grass near where at least one student was standing. The boy then called 000, telling the operator he'd initially planned to kill people and himself, but changed his mind because he didn't want his siblings to have a brother who was a killer.
Yankee 104, we are with the vehicle. Firearms are secured in the vehicle. 1 male in custody.
He pleaded guilty to a string of charges, including doing an act that endangered lives, with Children's Court President Hilton Quayle describing his actions as extremely serious and wicked. The judge said it was fortunate no one was killed or injured, telling the teenager good luck prevented a tragic outcome and potentially life imprisonment for you. The teenager's lawyers had sought a non-custodial sentence, telling the court at the time their client had undiagnosed autism spectrum disorder and depression. But Judge Quayle said while school shootings were rare in Australia, he had to send a message to the community, particularly students, that such crimes would be met with severe consequences.
It is a shocking thing, and it just heightens, I think, concern around a move towards an American-style gun culture in Australia, and we should do everything we can to avoid and stop that.
The boy will have to serve 16 months before he can be released. Joanna Manar, ABC News.
A cloud of suspicion hangs over dozens and possibly hundreds of former politicians across Australia after the revelation one has been a spy for a foreign country. The head of Australia's top security agency, ASIO, says the figure sold out their country by joining a secret influence operation. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
Inside a building of secrets,
welcome to ASIO.
A tantalising glimpse into a clandestine overseas spy ring.
Right now, there is a particular team in a particular foreign intelligence service with a particular focus on Australia.
The ASIO boss revealing how operatives dubbed the A-Team successfully cultivated a former Member of Parliament several years ago.
This politician sold out their country, party, former colleagues to advance the interests of a foreign regime.
With attempted infiltration into the highest levels of government.
At one point, the former politician even proposed bringing a Prime Minister's family member into the spy's orbit.
But when challenged to identify the unnamed culprit...
I'm not going to name the individual. We're a rule of law country.
Instead, Mike Burgess noted that tougher foreign interference laws had been passed since this episode.
Personally, I don't think they'll be stupid enough to repeat what they've done in the past.
The intelligence chief says his decision to publicly call out the A-Team is part of a real-world, real-time disruption, letting the foreign spies know that their activities here have been uncovered. But his decision to not identify the former politician is generating a furious guessing game inside this building, as well as demands for more information.
The former politician who sold out this country could be in this building right now. Why won't you name the traitor now?
It's a matter for the Director-General of ASIO. If he was to choose to name that.
I've said I have a fair idea, and I'm being careful about what I say publicly because of that.
There absolutely would be benefit, though, in ensuring that not all former politicians carry some sort of smear or smirch upon them.
Let's not get offended because we're talking about national security matters. It is clearly in the national interest for this to be the subject of national discussion.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure.
A very public discussion of work that's usually hidden in the shadows. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
An arrest in Melbourne that triggered allegations about the Federal Immigration Minister's competence has turned out to be an embarrassing police bungle. After announcing they'd caught a former immigration detainee over a spate of sexual offences, Victoria Police have admitted they got the wrong man and he had nothing to do with the 149 people released from detention by the High Court's ruling last year.
Word travels quickly through Parliament House.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration.
Particularly when it's about the alleged behaviour of an individual recently released into the community.
Charged with sexual assault, stalking and 2 counts of unlawful assault in Victoria.
Yesterday, police arrested a man who they said was one of the 149 people set free following last year's High Court ruling that indefinite immigration detention for people who can't be deported was unlawful. He appeared in the Melbourne Magistrates Court today, not once, but twice. The charges dropped this afternoon, with police confirming they'd got the wrong guy. A local man not connected to the released detainees, now the person of interest.
With further evidence, it is clear the person arrested is not the offender, and for that we are sincerely sorry that this person has been detained.
The development coming well after the Coalition had sought to make political mileage out of it in question time.
Why did the Minister fail to use his powers to seek to re-detain this serial sex offender and protect these 2 Victorian women?
I am not in a position, and I will not comment on any individual case because I will not prejudice any court proceedings.
The opposition weaponising the issue ahead of this weekend's by-election in the Melbourne seat of Dunkley. The Deputy Opposition Leader posting on social media, "If you live in Frankston and you've got a problem with Victorian women being assaulted by foreign criminals, vote against Labor." Susan Lee's office isn't retreating from that sentiment in light of this embarrassing blunder by Victorian police, arguing there's a broader issue at play with how the government has handled the release of this group. And ahead of the Dunkley poll, it's banking on the community feeling the same. Despite Labor's insistence, it's done all it can to keep them safe. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
Zip shareholders are up in arms over a recent decision by the company to on-sell their shares. A week before the sale process was announced, 2 directors picked up a swag of shares on the market and have since reaped the benefits as Zip's recovery gathered pace and smaller shareholders missed out.
It was once a rising star in financial services. Now Zip, the buy now, pay later hopeful, is facing the ire of shareholders who claim they were forced to sell out when the share price was at a 7-year low.
It was an initiative that was a few months in the planning.
The week before the sale plan was announced, the company's chair, Diane Smith-Gander, and another director, Meredith Scott, bought a substantial amount of stock. They complied with the rules, but many small investors feel they were unfairly treated because they have missed out.
I think the purchase of shares by the key executives was a demonstration that they believed in the future of the company and a strong signal to shareholders.
Zip announced the sale plan in October for shareholders who held less than $500 worth of stock. The catch, if shareholders didn't want to sell their shares, they had to opt out by November 20. The ABC has spoken to some shareholders who said the communication wasn't clear. Many only knew their shares had been sold after they disappeared from their brokerage accounts. The company argues these investors were given adequate notice.
Investors were very well informed.
But of the 78,000 affected investors, almost 70,000 had their shares sold. They were paid just over 40 cents a share. Since then, the price has more than doubled. Corporate watchdog ASIC says it has had a small number of complaints about alleged misconduct over the notice, but there was no evidence the company broke the listing rules. ASIC says there's room for companies to make it more clear to investors what action needs to be taken to retain their shares. But the Australian Securities Exchange says the rules won't be changed. Nassim Khadem, ABC News.
The state government and industry in WA's northwest have signed a historic agreement on the management, protection and conservation of the Burrup Peninsula. Premier Roger Cook signed the statement of intent at Herson's Cove, along with representatives from Rio Tinto, Woodside and groups with development companies in the region. If the states, each group is willing to give the Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation an equal say on all development decisions on the Burrup. The Premier says it's a big step towards securing a World Heritage listing for the Murujuga cultural landscape.
To achieve a World Heritage listing of the Murujuga cultural landscape, we must collectively prove that we can manage these values in a way that is sustainable and in a way which is enduring.
Tomorrow night, on an extended edition of ABC News WA, state political reporter Kian Burke speaks to Liberal leader Libby Mettam in the latest of our monthly in-depth interviews for Stateline. You can see the interview during our 7 p.m. news. You'll also be able to catch up on ABC iView. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear Donald Trump's claim he should be immune from prosecution on charges of trying to overturn the 2020 election. The Conservative Majority Court will hear arguments in April, a move which calls into question whether the case could go to trial before the November election. At the same time, an Illinois judge barred the former president from appearing on the state's primary ballot because of his role in the January 6 Capitol riot. But she delayed her ruling due to the Supreme Court hearing. It came as one of the most powerful figures in US politics, Mitch McConnell, announced he was stepping down, potentially ceding more influence to Donald Trump and Republican hardliners. While Australians grapple with a cost of living crisis, for many young Japanese, moving down under is a financial boon. Plagued with low wages and economic hardships, Japan is now officially in recession. So Japanese workers are flocking to Australia in record numbers.
Armed with a small camera, Shoma Tanaka talks candidly to his social media followers about his earnings, expenses and, most importantly, savings.
It is definitely easier to work in Australia. The hours are less than in Japan and the pay is higher in my case, so it's much easier mentally.
Since arriving in 2019, he's worked a variety of jobs. Currently, he's at a metalworks factory, earning twice what he would back home. On his YouTube channel, Shoma explains how the higher income, combined with a bit of frugality, has helped him save $200,000 and buy his dad a new car.
If there are people who are working and feeling a bit frustrated in Japan, I'd like to let them know that there is a path to choose, a working holiday, and there are possibilities for them.
Japan has slipped into recession as the country battles a weak yen and an ageing, shrinking population.
I feel the cost of food is going up, and I'm shocked how much the power and gas bills cost lately.
I'd like to give more and more back to my employees. However, in reality, while the cost of goods and expenses are rising, it's impossible.
The number of Japanese applying to work in Australia has hit record levels as people seek sanctuary from low, stagnant wages.
There is a very strong incentive for Japanese people to, work outside for a certain period and earn money and then come back.
It's not all bad news. Major Japanese firms are posting record profits and the stock market is back to all-time highs. What many workers here want to know is when this good news will flow through to their wallets.
I'm worried about my life. From my point of view, Japan is declining.
Those economic headwinds may take a long time to subside. James Oaten, ABC News, Tokyo.
The federal government is phasing out cheques by 2030, but banks are running well ahead of that timeline, with one major bank no longer processing cheques from this week.
Pensioner Michael Coogan uses cheques to pay his rent.
We don't do any banking online because we're not familiar enough with computers. Computers don't figure largely in our lives.
Banks say cheques are costly to process, even more so as fewer people use them. It's a cost that'll shift now to Mr Coogan when his bank stops issuing cheques this week, and he'll have to begin paying a fee to pay rent.
Every cent counts. And to all those 33-year-olds and 34-year-olds out there, one day you will be 43 and 53 and 63, and you'll discover that your income shrinks.
National Seniors Australia fear vulnerable people will be left behind as banking goes digital.
So the banks have got to really just make sure that, you know, as a system, that they are providing support to the entire community, not just the cohort that have mortgages.
The use of cheques has dropped 90% in the past decade, now making up less than 1% of all transactions. The federal government admits phasing out cheques will affect older and lower income Australians, but has promised an inclusive, gradual shift. Tenants Queensland is worried the end of cheques will push more people onto fee-charging third-party platforms.
In effect, the agents are subcontracting their rent collection requirements and also cost shifting onto the tenant. It just makes sense that you shouldn't be charged for paying your rent.
The Australian Banking Association says its members are supporting customers to transition to easier, more accessible ways to pay.
I'm not comfortable with it. I know by the number of cheques, other people aren't comfortable with it.
But they'll soon have to get used to it. Jessica Black, ABC News.
To finance now, and retail sales bounced back in January and retailers helped push the local share market higher today. Here's Alan Kohler.
Retail sales rose 1.1% in January, a decent recovery from the 2.1% decline in December. But as you can see from the chart, the big picture is that the amount being spent in stores and online has levelled off after the big rise coming out of the pandemic. And what's more, that rise was all about prices. This chart separates retail sales into volume and value. The volume of shopping has been flat for 2 years, but values have increased by almost 10%, and that's all price. Retailers had a good session on the ASX today after Harvey Norman beat expectations with its profit result. And other results were well received as well, including the hospitals group Ramsay Healthcare, Macquarie Technology and Star Entertainment. The US market was down a bit last night. Iron ore fell 2%, and the Aussie dollar was steady just above 65 US cents. In other news, Bitcoin has hit a new record high in Australian dollars. It's still about 20% below the 2022 peak in US dollars, but the Aussie dollar has devalued 13% in the past 2 years, so Australian crypto punters have been bigger winners. Meanwhile, the price of carbon dioxide emission allowances in Europe has fallen by half in the past year because emissions are falling and the demand for certificates that let companies emit has also gone down. But the price of the Australian equivalent is rising for the opposite reason. Companies are buying more Australian carbon credit units to cover their higher emissions. And that's finance.
The leap year day only comes around once every 4 years, an extra day in February to synchronise the calendar year with the Earth's orbit of the Sun. For those born on the 29th of February, there are pros and cons of being a leapling. Fewer birthdays, but the opportunity to be forever young.
Dongara man Bill Kearns has reached a milestone a little later than most of us. It's his 21st birthday.
21 today and I haven't caught a cray. But tomorrow's another day.
But age can be deceiving. The retired cray fisherman has a few years under his belt, with almost 30 of those spent working on boats. He was born on the 29th of February 1940, 84 years ago. But because it was a leap year, his real birthday only comes up every 4 years.
I was a bit upset because other kids were having theirs every year, and I thought, what's going on here? And then as I got to grow older, then my mother explained to me what was happening and I got to accept it.
At 21, Bill still loves getting out on the water. These days, with the help from his mates.
It's blowing a little bit outside, so we're going in the harbour to do a bit of crabbing. And now I'm just recreational fishing with a couple of pots to catch a few crays because I accidentally didn't know it, but while I was doing all this, I fell in love with the sea. And the sea's got the salt waters in my veins. The proof is in the pudding. You gotta wait, but there it is. There's our first crab.
Over the years, he's gathered a few tips and tricks on how to stay young.
I'd rather be out here doing something in the daytime than sitting home looking at the bricks in the wall. I got notice there's 21 on the card, so I'd rather stick with that. I feel younger already. Good.
Turns out the leap year birthday isn't so bad after all. Alice Angeloni, ABC News, Dongara.
To sport, Cameron Green's century has prevented New Zealand from dismissing Australia for a modest total on day one of the first test in Wellington. Green thrived in difficult batting conditions and reached his second test century shortly before stumps.
Tails. The home team won the toss and had no hesitation in bowling on a green-tinged pitch.
Not too upset with that. Yeah, seems like there's been some first inning scores that have been big, so that's the aim today.
A rare visit to New Zealand from the Australian Test team led to a sold-out crowd at the Basin Reserve.
Isn't that a gorgeous picture?
Australia's openers survived some anxious moments.
Hasn't carried through to Tom Latham at second slip.
The Usman Khawaja-Steve Smith combination was still finding its feet.
They weren't awake to it, New Zealand. They weren't awake to it.
With lunch approaching, the Black Caps finally made a breakthrough.
New Zealand have their first. What a catch from Blundell, and it's Matt Henry.
Marnus Labuschagne's run of low scores in tests continued as New Zealand's pace attack dominated.
Oh, yes! What a ripper from Henry. He's got one to swing and he's got it to swing late.
Travis Head came and went.
There it is.
Allan Border medalist Mitch Marsh decided attack was the best approach, but it brought about his undoing on 40.
High on the ban, it's a big wicket.
Another West Australian all-rounder stood tall.
Finds the gap. That's a lovely shot.
With wickets tumbling, Green accelerated to his century.
That is 4, that is 100, his second in test matches. What a sensational knock this has been. Cam Green, take a bow.
Just one of those days, and I think someone just needed to bat through, so yeah, I was glad it was me.
Australia ended a hard-fought day with Green unconquered, but only one wicket in hand. Duncan Huntsdale, ABC News.
Western Australia's men's cricket coach Adam Voges says signing a 2-year contract extension was an easy decision. Voges will remain in his role until the end of the 2025-26 summer. Since he took the job in 2018, WA has won 8 titles, including 2 Sheffield Shields, 4 One-Day Cups and 2 Big Bash crowns. Voges' new contract expires at the same time as current Australia coach Andrew McDonald's, but he's played down his aspirations for the top job.
Do the best job that you can in the place that you're at, and if that provides opportunity down the track, then so be it.
There's no doubt in terms of his skill set, he'd absolutely do that job beautifully, and in terms of personality, there's probably, you know, a nice continuum of Adam's style with Andrew McDonald's style.
The Perth Lynx have won game 1 of their best-of-3 WNBL semi-final series against the Townsville Fire in a thriller 88-87 in Townsville. Both sides hit the scoreboard early, trading baskets with only 2 points separating them at quarter time. Townsville looked in control with Sammy Whitcomb fouled in the dying seconds, overcoming an ankle injury to push out the lead to 7 points at the main break. Amy Atwell keeping the Lynx in the match, Perth dominating the third quarter, snatching the lead to be up by 6 at the break. In a hectic final quarter, the lead changed hands several times, but the Lynx managed to hold on for victory. Game 2 will be held in Perth on Sunday. The Perth Wildcats will play the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers in their best-of-3 NBL semi-final series. The Wildcats haven't played for 2 weeks since finishing second in their regular season. The Jack Jumpers beat Illawarra in a one-off elimination match yesterday, setting up Game 1 against the Wildcats in Perth on March the 8th. Wildcats guard Ben Henschel says knowing their opponent will help them prepare.
We know who we're playing now, so we can adjust practices to get ready to defend some guys. But no, yeah, it's definitely good to know who we're playing.
Rejuvenated Matilda's striker Michelle Heyman is proving age is just a number with her 4-goal blitz against Uzbekistan, rocketing her into Olympics contention. The 35-year-old's performance was the exclamation mark in the Australians' 10-0 drubbing of the Uzbeks in Melbourne, handing coach Tony Gustafsson an even tougher task of selecting the squad for Paris.
After a night to remember for Michelle Heyman, you could barely wipe the smile off her face.
So it was just a really sweet moment to be able to, you know, score a 4. Just wild.
Heyman says the past week has been an emotional rollercoaster. 5 years after retiring from international football, the veteran's comeback couldn't have gone better.
A lot of people told me that I couldn't do it, you're too old, so it's really nice to be able to show people that it doesn't matter how old you are.
Heyman's heroics helped the Matildas book a ticket to Paris. The real test will come against the world's best.
Can she bring the pressing intensity and the game out on the field when you have less time and space?
But I do believe in my ability, and I know how hard I've been pushing myself to, get here, but I'm not stopping.
Opportunities ahead of the Olympics will be thin. Australia plays Mexico in April before 2 yet-to-be-announced send-off matches in June.
When we go to governments these days and say there's a Matildas match, they get snapped up pretty quickly. So hopefully it's in a few different cities.
And competition for spots will be fierce. The squad must be cut from 23 to 18.
It's always been cutthroat, and I think that's the nature of, the Matildas setup.
Gustafsson says creating chemistry is key.
So when I select a squad for Olympics, I might leave some players out of that roster that is better individually, but it's about building the best team.
Katrina Gorry has hinted the Olympics could be her farewell.
For most of us, it's probably, could be our last major tournament. So I think, to go out with a bang would be pretty amazing for all of us.
Gorry looking to the future.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Alongside her daughter, Harper. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
Fremantle will be without a host of first-choice players for tomorrow's pre-season clash with Port Adelaide. Jai Amos has a leg injury while Luke Jackson has concussion, both sustained in last week's practice match win over the West Coast. Michael Frederick and Nathan O'Driscoll were also injured and won't play tomorrow. Recruit Jeremy Sharp will line up in his first game for the club, named on the wing. And now to the weather with Herlyn, Kaur, and we might have some rain on the way, Herlyn.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Pamela. A pretty typical way to start autumn. We had clear blue skies today, though, to cap off summer, so hopefully you also made some good use of the extra 24 hours we had being a leap day. The mercury peaked at 33.5 degrees in the city at about 1:15 this afternoon from a cool night with a low of 15.9 around 6 a.m. Now, we got chilly at a few spots in the south overnight, still mostly in the teens though, but air fell to 6 degrees, which was the state's lowest minimum. Temperatures rose to the 30s across the south, 32 in Bunbury and 33 for Katanning. Warburton in the interior was the hottest place with 45 degrees, the top there. On the satellite, and much of the country's north has seen convective cloud with a fair bit of rain over the Kimberley. Some isolated parts had about 50 millimetres up to 9 a.m. On the synoptic, a broad trough is persisting over the north this week, bringing those showers and storms. Meanwhile, a high pressure system continues to build south of WA as a broad trough over the west coast deepens over the weekend, and that will trigger some of those wet and stormy conditions for Perth as well. Nationally, and it's partly cloudy for most of the capitals over east tomorrow. 31 for Brisbane, 30 in Sydney and 32 in Canberra. Cooler and some cloud for Melbourne and Hobart in the 20s. Mostly sunny for Adelaide, 29 degrees, and Darwin 33, and a possible shower and storm. Back to WA, and those showers and storms will continue into tomorrow for much of the north, with heavy falls again possible for the Kimberley. Very hot tomorrow, 44 forecast for Marble Bar, in the high 30s for most coastal towns. Parts of central WA could also see a storm and some showers, especially through the goldfields. It'll be windy across the central west, 34 degrees in Geraldton. Mullawa could reach a hot 38. Windy in the morning about the southern parts of the state as well, including the Darling Scarp. Showers are possible through the east, but still mostly pleasant daytime temperatures for much of the region. There's an extreme fire danger forecast for several districts, with a total fire ban for parts of the Goldfields and the southwest regions tomorrow. For Perth, we'll get a warm and sunny 34 degrees for the first day of autumn from a low of 19 overnight. Winds on the local waters will be southeasterly up to 25 knots. The sun will rise at 6 minutes past 6, setting at 6:51. And the weekend will still be warm, but there is a possibility of a shower on both days, up to 20 mils on Sunday, and a possible storm clearing in time for Monday with partly cloudy conditions, 28, and then slowly warming up into the mid-30s. Pamela.
Thanks for that, Herlyn. That's ABC News for now. Jade Barker will be back with your late news. And you can stay up to date with ABC News online or catch the news anytime on ABC iView. Stay with us now, though, for 7:30.